the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday, November 18th. Hope everybody's having a fantastic weekend, entering a fantastic week. And I will be here all week, I think. I'm not feeling that well, so I'm hoping I'm not coming down with something that'll knock me out and I won't be able to do the show. But my plan is to be here all week. So with shows, I leave on Saturday for a very long trip. Another reason why I don't want to get sick. So let's hope I stay healthy. We will see. Let's see. Also tonight we have a interview with Robert Zubrin, and we're going to be talking about Mars. We're going to talk about nuclear power. It's going to be fascinating. I mean, he runs the Mars Society. So this is a guy who's really thought about going to Mars, why we should go to Mars, what we would do in Mars, how Mars would work. So I'm curious to find out and to really, go deep. Very articulate guy. And it should be a fascinating conversation. It'll be 3 hours from now. Yes, it's 7 p.m. Shows will not overlap. Only because I'm not going to be able to go more than an hour and a half, 2 hours today, just because, as I said, I'm not feeling that well. But of course, who knows? I mean, if you guys come up with amazing super chat questions that cannot be answered in the time allotted, who knows what will happen? We will see. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I think we're ready to roll. Again, I'll remind you, pretty much the rest of the week will be shows, probably 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Eastern time every day. And I'll try to make those 3+ hour shows. So those can be long shows. I'm clearing up my afternoons, so there are no constraints, so we can go as long as we need to go. Today will be a slightly shorter show. All right, let's. Should we jump into? We jump into it with. All right, let's jump into it with World War III. Again, people are talking about World War III, panicking, hysteria, nuttiness. Why? Because Biden finally, after dithering for 2.5 years, has approved that Ukraine use American weapon systems to fire against military positions within Russia. So some of the medium-range missiles that the United States has provided, the Ukrainians cannot be used for what they were designed to do. That is to actually fire for medium-length distances, which would place them into Russia. So there's a lot of panic around this. There seems to be panic, seems to be just the regular feature of anything to do with Putin. Everything is escalation and oh my God. And it's notice, it's always interesting, the World War III stuff is Putin invades Ukraine. That's not leading to World War III. North Korea sends troops to fight on Putin's side. That's not leading to World War III. But I don't know, Ukraine fighting back in February 2022 when Russia invades, that's World War III. Sending guns and ammunition to Ukraine, that will definitely cause World War III. Sending medium-sized artillery or missile systems to Ukraine, even though they're restricted and only firing on Ukraine territory, that definitely will cause World War III. Sending tanks and airplanes from NATO countries, old Soviet-style tanks and weapon systems to Ukraine, that is World War III, no question. And you could go on and on. I mean, letting Ukraine strike Crimea, World War III. Letting Ukraine strike Russia, World War III. Letting Ukraine invade Russia, as they have in Kursk, World War III. Sending M16s, F-16s to Ukraine, F-16s. That is unquestionably, for sure, no doubt about it, World War III. And of course, it doesn't only apply to Ukraine. Everything is always the West's fault. Killing Soleimani way back when was going to lead to World War III. Striking Iranian facilities in Syria by the Israelis was definitely going to get World War III. And then killing Hanaya, killing Nasrallah, killing Sinwar, striking Hezbollah, beepers, World War III. In other words, what so many people out there, left and right, depending on the issue, right, depending on which war we're talking about, would like the West to do is just roll over and pretend to be dead and let the Putins, the Hezbollahs, the Iranians, the Hamases of the world just roll right over us. Because, God forbid, World War III. Now, of course, nobody wants World War III. But let's remember that first, what are you going to do? You're going to not defend yourself because World War III? You're going to just agree to become a satellite of Putin's, Xi's, Khamenei's, North Korea's, because you're afraid of World War III? And why do you think the other side's not afraid of World War III? Why is the assumption is that, they want World War III even though they will be annihilated in World War III? They don't value their lives? They don't care. Now, maybe that's true of the Iranians. They do get 72 virgins, but I don't think Putin gets 72 virgins. It's just such a sign of weakness, such a sign of pathetic compromise, anti-escalation. Just give in. Let the bad guys win, because we don't have enough confidence in our own ability. We don't have enough confidence in our own legitimacy. We don't have enough confidence in our own, in the truth of our cause, in the goodness of our cause. So let the other side win, because World War III, fear is such a powerful emotion, such a destructive emotion, mostly, because it prevents you from doing what is right, prevents you from doing what is good, prevents you from doing what is necessary, and opens you up to nonsense, to conspiracy theories, to just garbage. I mean, again, Putin understands this. Trump understands this. Xi understands this. People with that authoritarian, I don't know, what do you call it, ability, that authoritarian sense of people, understand that to rule people, you want to make them afraid. And this is true also on the left. That is, the kind of the elites on the left. If you're afraid, then you'll rush to them for advice. You'll rush to them for comfort. You'll rush to them for leadership, to tell you what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. So every time you see this World War III, be aware. Now, the one area where I worry about World War III, again, I don't think it's going to happen, but I worry a little bit, is China. Just because I think this administration, our administration, the U.S. administration, is so incompetent, is going to be so incompetent, and so bullheaded and stupid, that just like Kennedy and Johnson got us into the Vietnam War without us even noticing, these guys are going to get us into some kind of war with China without us even noticing. And instead of recognizing the threat that China poses and having a long-term real strategy around it, it seems like the people that Trump is surrounding himself for national security are intent on poking China and poking China and poking China and poking China, as if that is a sign of strength, and as if that is strategy when that is the exact opposite. So if you're going to worry about World War III, I would worry about China, and I would worry about the fact that the United States has not had a foreign policy strategy since World War II, and now we really, really, really need it. Really, really, really need it. Yeah, somebody wrote on Twitter, Biden uses his last few brain cells to push us into World War III before he is booted out of office. It's scandalous. Because Biden has authorized Ukraine to use ATAMCs, long-range weapons, for limited strike inside Russia. And this is in response, supposedly, to North Korea's deployment of thousands of troops. Tit for tat, tit for tat. They like tit for tat, instead of just going, no, we want to win. So we're going to use the weapons necessary to win. Does Iran not fear nuclear war at all? There is zero risk of Putin using nukes. I do fear nuclear war, absolutely. There is absolutely a positive risk of Putin using nukes. And the weaker we are, the more hesitant we are, the more restraining of Ukraine we are, the more, we don't want to escalate we are, the more likely it is he'll use the nukes. If we had, from the beginning, backed Ukraine fully, gave them more weapons, allowed them to use it, provided them with whatever resources they needed to push the Russians back, and pulled our ambassador from Moscow and aggressively promoted Ukraine victory, then I think Putin would be reluctant to use nuclear weapons because he'd be afraid. He doesn't want to die. He knows that nukes would have him die in addition to a lot of Europeans and maybe a lot of Americans. It would be horrific. It would be the end of the world as we know it. The best way to stop that is to, without any equivocation, without any doubt, convince Putin that we would wipe out Moscow. And, if he used a tactical nuke, which was what he'd use initially, would wipe out Moscow. If we made that clear, there would be no new World War III. And I worry about World War III China because I think that, again, we're weak. Trump will be just as weak, we'll be incompetent, and we'll trickle ourselves into kind of a World War III with China. And then, China could convince itself that it could attack us with nukes before it would be annihilated. So that worries me. I also think that China's weapon systems are better than Russia's, more dangerous than Russia's, including their nukes. So Russia has quantity, which is scary. But yeah, the way to deal with a bully is not to show weakness. That only encourages him. So yeah, I'm very concerned about Putin using a nuclear weapon. But this joke of every time America does anything semi-mildly, little bit assertive, it's World War III, is getting to be ridiculous. And it needs to be called out. I called it out when it was first done, and I'm calling it out again, and I'll keep calling it out because you can't live in fear. You can't live in fear. You've got to be afraid, rationally afraid, and have a strategy on how to deal with the threat in spite of that fear. By the way, Russia continues to escalate, doing things that arguably should lead to World War III. For example, the communication cable between Finland and Germany, the main communication link between Finland and Central Europe and Western Europe, has been destroyed, has stopped working. People suspect sabotage. They're looking into it. And then that was kind of yesterday discovered. And then today, it appears that another undersea cable in the Baltic Sea, this one running from Sweden and Lithuania, was also damaged on Sunday. So it appears, although it's too early to say it was Russia, but it's very likely to be Russia, that Russia is engaging in sabotage against clear Western interests in the Baltic Sea. And partially, again, this is their attempt to push back against the fact that basically the Baltic Sea has become NATO's sea, with the Russians having a small naval base in the Baltic Sea, but basically everything else is NATO. And this is a consequence of the fact that Finland joined NATO and now has basically made the Baltic Sea a NATO sea. And that the Russians can't be happy about that, so they're going to poke a needle as much as they can. Now, it seems like an act of war to cut cables from, and this is not Ukrainian cables, these are Swedish, German, Lithuanian, Finnish cables, all members of NATO. What is NATO going to do about it? Probably nothing. Weakness. All right, let's turn to free speech. I know a lot of you believe that Donald Trump was the free speech candidate in this election. And I'm going to do whatever I can in our time together to dissuade you that actually that's not true. Not true. Donald Trump is going to do whatever he can, and that means a lot, to dissuade you of this, because Donald Trump is not a free speech candidate. He's the anti-free speech candidate, always was. Even worse than Kamala. Yes, I do believe even worse than Kamala, because the kind of free speech things that he is talking about, he can actually get done. Kamala's stuff, she needed Congress. But anyway, they're both anti-free speech, both of them. But you believe that Trump was a free speech candidate. So here is what Trump wrote, I think this morning, on Truth Network. And he wrote this about a Iowa pollster, Ann Seltzer, where she published a pre-election poll in Iowa that was mistakenly suggested that Kamala Harris was leading Trump 47-44 in Iowa. Everybody was very suspicious of this poll because it seemed like a wrong poll, but Ann Seltzer is a very distinguished pollster who's had a long, long career at this. It's clearly, she got it wrong, as pollsters do. But here's Trump's response. She got it big time wrong, and indeed, she is now no longer going to be doing polls for the Des Moines Register. Here's what Donald Trump wrote. A totally fake poll that caused great distrust and uncertainty at a very crucial time. She knew exactly what she was doing. Thank you to the great people of Iowa for giving me such a record-breaking vote, despite possible election fraud by Ann Seltzer. And the now discredited newspaper, this is Des Moines Register, for which she works. An investigation is fully called for. So now we're going to investigate pollsters when the polls are not what you want them to be. We're going to go and investigate pollsters. I mean, I think we should investigate voters when they don't vote the way we want them to vote. And, there's obviously fraud going on by the voters. There's a mind virus, and we need to clear it out. We need to clean it out. We need to fix them. And to do that, we're going to have to, I think, investigate voters. So if you voted for Kamala Harris, expect a knock on your door, and we'll be investigating to make sure that it was an honest vote and that you knew what you were doing. But that's impossible, because nobody could actually vote for Kamala Harris. It must be fraud. It must be you lied. You actually wanted to vote for Trump, but you decided not to for illegitimate reasons. I mean, this is insanity. It's insanity, but this is Donald Trump. Investigate, and maybe that's not convincing about free speech. That's only one example. We know, of course, that Donald Trump has threatened many of the broadcasters that if they say things he doesn't like, then they might lose their license, because saying things Donald Trump doesn't like is not in the public interest. It really isn't. I mean, the public interest is to confirm that Trump is indeed always right, as a congressman said the other day. I think I read you the quote. So, so let's look at Donald Trump's FCC nominee. So the FCC is the regulatory agency that regulates the communication networks, an agency that you would think that if Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy was serious about cutting government spending and streamlining government, this agency would be gone, history, dismantled. But it won't be. Anyway, Trump has appointed his guy for the FCC, or his nominee for the FCC, and that is Brendan Carr, who is a commissioner at the FCC right now, and he will become the head of the FCC once, I guess it's another year before there is a change. So the positions at the FCC go a year into the new president's term. But once the term expires, Carr will become the chairman of the FCC. And so let's find out what Carr believes. Let me just, where is this? I had the quote a second ago. Yeah, here it is. This is the guy that your candidate, your defender of free speech, is nominated for the agency that is responsible for example, broadcasters. Quote, broadcast media have had the privilege of using a scarce and valuable public resource, our airwaves, in turn. They are required by law to operate in the public interest. When the transition is complete, the FCC will enforce this public interest obligation. So the Trump administration is pulling out what collectivists always pull out, which is the public interest, as a means to start regulating broadcast media, ABC, CBS, NBC. No matter that broadcast media is insignificant in the media landscape of the world today, but they will go after them. So to the extent that these networks, CBS, NBC, ABC, Trump, by the way, has sued CBS already, don't like the Trump administration or criticize the Trump administration or criticize Trump or criticize the FCC, and the FCC deems it not in the public interest to criticize Trump, they will be taken care of. Now, this is about as big a violation of free speech as you can get. Now, there shouldn't be public licenses. But if there are public licenses, they should be just left free to do with a public license whatever they want. Ideally, you auction the licenses and sell them and get out of the business and sell the FCC or close down the FCC. As I said, that's what Elon Musk and Ramaswamy should do. But note how explicit they are. You know, Trump threatens CBS, ABC, NBC, and he appoints an FCC commissioner who is quite happy, quite willing to do it. Now, of course, like all Trump nominees, the big positive that this new FCC commissioner, not new FCC commissioner, commission head, brings to the table, just like the Department of Defense and pretty much every other guy out there, the thing that really makes them a hero of modern Republican Party is that he is anti-woke, anti-DEI. So as Cass said, he's going to no longer consider DEI a key strategic issue, and they're going to wipe it out of the agency's budget. Good job. All for that. I think any Republican candidate for this job would do that. But, okay, we get rid of DEI, we get rid of woke, and we replace it with what? We replace it with censorship. That's good. That's good. That's a good trade-off, right? And finally, just in case you thought, oh, Yaron, that's no big a deal. He's not that bad. Prior to his nomination as FCC chairman, Carr wrote a letter to the CEOs of the 4 largest tech companies, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, and Alphabet. It's Google, if you don't know. And in the letter, he demanded information about the unprecedented surge in censorship. Surge in censorship. Quote, congressional investigations, press reports, and other evidence show that in many cases, you did not act alone. Rather, you participated in a censorship cartel that included not only technology and social media companies, but also advertising, marketing, and so-called fact-checking organization, as well as Biden-Harris administration itself. This censorship cartel is an affront to America's constitutional freedoms and must be completely dismantled. Americans must be able to reclaim their right of free speech. Indeed, our democracy depends on the freedom of expression, as long as it's expression we agree with. Really? I mean, this is clearly a violation of Apple, Microsoft's, Meta's, and Google's free speech. Their free speech includes the right to have anybody's opinion on their platform or not. They get to set the terms of use, not the government. I mean, if this guy is for real, this is a massive, massive government takeover, government, push for power over big tech. Massive. This is just as bad as Lena Khan in antitrust. This is not freedom you're going to get from these Trump appointees. What Carr is suggesting is censorship. Censoring Google, censoring Microsoft, censoring Apple, censoring Facebook. Censorship. In a post on X, after it was announced that he would be FCC chair, he added, quote, we must dismantle the censorship cartel and restore free speech rights to every American. That is a contradictory statement. You cannot restore free speech by censoring people. Free speech is not the right to say whatever you want to say on my platform. That's why I can block you here on the chat. That's why I can kick you out of my home. That's why I can fire you from your job. That's why I can have standards and block you on my platform. We could argue whether standards are good, bad, objective, non-objective, rational, irrational, sure. But they certainly have a right. And if we have a right, we have a right to be irrational. We have a right to have bad standards. We have a right to have wrong standards. I mean, I believe, and somebody was suggesting creating a wiki or some kind of Google Doc or something. I don't know if you're allowed to use Google these days, so think about that. And a wiki, I don't know. Anyway, of all my predictions, here's another one. I believe this administration is going to be the most anti-free speech administration we've ever had. I also think that it is going to be probably one of the most interventionist administrations we've ever had in the economy. And not the most, but one of the most. And I think the only barrier, the only protection we have for free speech is the Supreme Court. And luckily, I think the Supreme Court has a better understanding, from what I've read so far, a better understanding of free speech than Carr or Trump or any of the people surrounding them. By the way, who do you think is a huge Carr supporter? Who do you think actually got him the nomination? Who agrees that we have to dismantle the censorship cartel? Well, of course, it's the CEO and owner of Twitter. That is your favorite guy, Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a huge supporter of Carr. He's a huge supporter of going after the so-called censorship cartel. And again, I'm pretty sure, another one of my predictions, that Ramaswamy and Musk are not going to go after the FCC as one of the agencies they want to shut down. I don't know about being scared of World War III. I'm not. I'm scared of these guys. Scared of these guys. That I am. That I am. Just one other thing to be scared of. I mean, there are reports that the Trump administration is going to declare on day one a national emergency because of the immigration crisis. And as part of that emergency, call up military assets to so-called reverse the Biden invasion through mass deportations. So we will be using American soldiers, maybe National Guards, maybe soldiers, Marines, Special Forces maybe, to round up so-called illegal immigrants and legal immigrants who Trump doesn't like their legal status, i.e. asylum seekers, to round them up for mass deportation. Now, this was put out on Twitter by somebody in terms of this is reports incoming, and Donald Trump retweeted it saying, true. So we're gonna, here's another one to list of authoritarian, anti-freedom, liberty steps. Our president on day one will declare a national emergency, a fake national emergency, to be able to call up the U.S. troops to act within the United States and basically start going house to house or workplace to workplace or whatever it is. They're going to go and check people's documents. And if they're not up to par, round them up for deportation. Put them in camps, I guess, and then deport them. And if J.D. Vance, I think, was asked, what if the children are American citizens and the parents are not? Are you going to separate families? And he said, no, not necessarily. I mean, they could all be deported. That's the attitude. So the U.S. citizens can leave with the parents. I don't know. What you guys voted for this guy. Is this what you expected? I don't know if this is what you expected. If it isn't, this is scary stuff. This should really, really, really scare you. Even if you're not an immigrant, there's the thing about first they came for the illegal immigrants, and then they came for you, and and you stayed quiet. All right, just in case you think, oh, you're exaggerating, and it's just these immigration thing and, that stuff. Other things, Donald Trump is really, really good. There's really, really good stuff here. I mentioned yesterday, I think, his selection for energy secretary, brilliant, excellent, best selection by far. Head and shoulders about anybody else that he selected so far. Him and the interior secretary, energy, to the extent that they can get stuff done, get stuff past Congress, get stuff implemented. Energy is going to be the one bright, shiny spot as we lose our free speech, as our military rounds up people in the streets, and as we lose our economic liberties, because it turns out, remember Trump at some point during the campaign said, he was basically saying, I'm going to not tax tips, and I'm going to not tax this, and I'm going to not tax that. He was giving freebies away to people, and one of the things he said was, I am going to cap interest rates on credit cards at 10%. And, I'm going to help the American people. I mean, you guys are struggling with affordability. I'm going to help you. And I'm going to tap her. And a lot of people probably said, oh, that's just one of those things, right? Just one of those stupid things that Trump says, and he doesn't really mean it. He's not for it. So anyway, Bernie Sanders decided to take him up on this. And Bernie Sanders tweeted yesterday. It was yesterday. No, a few days ago, 3 days ago, 4 days ago. I look forward to working with the Trump administration, on fulfilling his promise to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. We cannot continue to allow banks to make And you say, okay, well, that's just wishful thinking from Bernie Sanders, the socialist. But notice that this is huge for Bernie Sanders. This is like straight out of his plank. He must feel really, really proud and happy that Donald Trump is quoting Bernie Sanders. I always told you, going back to 2016, that the differences between Bernie Sanders and Trump were not that big in substance. Anyway, a Republican senator, the honorable senator from Missouri, right? Yeah. Josh Hawley writes, in response to Bernie Sanders, he writes, an anti-usury bill capping outrageous credit card rates ought to be a top priority for the next Congress. Top priority for the next Congress. So basically, Republicans have now become socialists. They've abandoned all semblance even of free markets. You remember when Kamala Harris suggested, capping, gouging some prices when some committee decided it was gouging and Republicans flipped out about price controls? Yep. As Republicans hate price controls when they're proposed by the left. Republicans love price controls when they are proposed by the right, by themselves, by MAGA. So there you go. We got price controls to add that to the list of wonderful things you can expect from the Trump administration. One of the things that are becoming clear, and were clear all along, to some of us, but some of you weren't convinced, is that Trump is serious about tariffs. This 20%, 40%, whatever tariffs across the board, 60% on China. He's not kidding. He's serious, and he is vetting Secretary of Treasury candidates right now who will support that agenda item. And it's going to be really, really interesting. It turns out that the Treasury Secretary is going to be the toughest one for him to pick. I don't know. I've seen a bunch of stories about how the candidates are ticking him off, and a big part of getting the job is ingratiating yourself to Trump, and some of them are being too needy. Some of them are maybe not as excited about tariffs as he would like. But anyway, he hasn't picked a Treasury Secretary yet, and he's still looking, and it's still kind of up in the air who that will be. But we do know that tariffs are coming. And one of the criticisms of tariffs that I hear all the time from people is the tariffs are inflationary. Tariffs are inflationary. Okay, so let's be clear. Tariff raised prices. Absolutely, they raised prices. So this is a continuation of my episode on inflation that I did a few weeks ago. If you are confused about inflation, go back and listen to my inflation talk a few weeks ago. It's up online. Tariffs raise prices in the goods that the tariff applies to, and in goods affiliated and associated with those goods. You raise tariffs on steel. Steel prices go up. Steel prices go up. So do the prices of everything that uses steel. At least the costs go up. But is that inflationary? And the answer is no, it's not. It's not inflationary. And it's not even price inflation. Because some prices will go up. But inflation means that the price level will go up and stay up. Like the inflation we had under Biden, it went up. Maybe now it's slowed to like 2.5%, something like that. But it's never going to go back down to where it was before Biden. It's a permanent inflation. It's a permanent increase. And the reason is because the amount of money in the economy, in a sense, has increased permanently. So there's more money, which drives up prices, stay permanently. Tariffs don't increase the amount of money people have. You still have what you have. Indeed, you could argue tariffs decrease the money people have because they bring about bankruptcies and they bring about layoffs and they bring about destitute. They bring about recessions, depressions, however you want to think about it. So when you raise tariffs, you're raising some prices and other prices are going to come down. Or if they don't come down, companies are going to go bankrupt because people won't have the money to spend. So if tariffs on, I don't know, what do you guys spend on money on? I mean, I spend on iPhones. If tariffs on iPhones go up 60% because the iPhone is, quote, imported from China. And my guess is that Tim Scott is working with the Trump administration to get an exclusion for Apple. That's, the one thing tariff will do, no question about it, is dramatically increase cronyism. Dramatically. But if the price of iPhones goes up by 60%, I'll have $600, assuming an iPhone is $1,000, less to spend on other things. And I won't spend it. Which will mean prices will have to come down, or companies will have to go out of business because I can't spend money anymore on their stuff. It could also mean that Apple struggles, and that this gives a huge advantage to Samsung, which is importing from Korea, not from China, and therefore will have a benefit of lower tariffs. But it's affecting relative prices, not absolute prices. And in that sense, it's not inflation. It's bad. It's terrible economic policy. It's unbelievably destructive. It's just not inflationary. You want to criticize it? Find other things to say to criticize it. Don't use inflation because it's just a misunderstanding of what inflation actually is. And it plays into the greedflation. It plays into the supply side shocks. Supply side shocks don't create inflation. They create relative price movements. Some things get more expensive, and then you have less money to spend on other things. That's not inflation. Inflation is when the value of the dollar declines because we've inflated it. There's more of it available. And that causes an overall rise in the price level. All right. What else? What else do we want to talk about? Oh, yeah. If we're talking about tariffs, I just thought that this whole RFK, we need to replace corn syrup and Coca-Cola with organic sugar cane is really, really interesting. And I hope that Musk and Ramaswamy look at this. Because if you really want to replace corn syrup with organic sugar cane, or not organic sugar cane, sugar, real sugar, actual sugar, then the solution to that is to get rid of sugar tariffs and corn subsidies. And by the way, getting rid of sugar tariffs and corn subsidies would save the government billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, and save consumers a huge amount, because the reality is that sugar on world markets, sugar that we could buy from Mexico, is a lot cheaper than corn syrup. The only reason we use corn syrup is because that sugar, when it crosses the border into America, is taxed. It's called a tariff. And you know what? Funnily enough, I mean, I know this is a surprise and a shock to most of you, but tariffs actually raise the prices of goods. And we Americans pay that price. So sugar costs much more in the United States than it should. And corn costs much less in the United States than it should. So, because of subsidies. The United States, the farm bills are massive, huge subsidies for corn. You know, who wouldn't, right? I mean, if you want to win Iowa, if you want to win Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, you better subsidize corn. It's the biggest industry in the Midwest. And it's become the biggest industry in the West, partially because of corn subsidies. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it would be really interesting to see what Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk think about farm subsidies. Really interesting, particularly corn subsidies, because almost all the farm subsidies go to red states, although some go to California. So some go to California, but most of them go to red states. Is that on the table for cutting? Because that's how you get rid of corn syrup and get sugar. Just free markets, it turns out, work. Which reminds me of the other big crisis going on, the RFK raising significant concerns about Fruit Loops. You know Fruit Loops? Fruit Loops. Well, it turns out that in Fruit Loops in the United States, artificial dyes are used to create the colors of the Fruit Loops. I guess Fruit Loops have different colors. I've never had Fruit Loops. I don't know, but that's my assumption. In Canada, though, to create the different colors of the Fruit Loops, that is done with fruit, with actually natural dyes. Now, the assumption is in our world, our crazy, insane, wacky leftist world, because this is a leftist point, is that natural is always better than not natural, and therefore natural colors are better than artificial colors, and therefore something's wrong with America. And what we need to do is, like Canada, we should ban artificial colors and therefore force whoever makes Fruit Loops to use natural colors. Only, it turns out, that Canada doesn't force that. It turns out that it's a consumer preference. Consumers in Canada, I guess, care about what color is used in their Fruit Loops. And if you offer them artificial and you offer them natural, they go for natural. And they're willing to pay a little bit extra for that. It turns out that in America, Americans don't care. Now, I suspect, and you know, I'm not a doctor, not a dietitian, not an expert. Oh, Enric is such a reactionary. He's such a, like, you know, he says all colors are natural. No. The colors that nature made, and then they're colors that man made, and man is not nature. Oh, wait a minute. I guess man is nature. I mean, this is the big difference. They're colors that God made, and then they're colors that man made. But God made man according to... Anyway, it's a difficult quandary, right? Difficult problem for us to have. Nature versus man-made. I kind of think man-made is better. You could actually tinker with it to optimize. Nature doesn't optimize. Nature certainly doesn't optimize for humans. Like, nature didn't create the fruit and vegetables and stuff out there, potatoes, whatever, to satisfy humans' evolutionary needs. Jennifer says, God made poison mushrooms. I mean, yes, but only bad people eat poison mushrooms or die. Good people, God prevents them from eating poison mushrooms. Really, Jennifer? God is just. Anyway, Fruit Loops. I suspect the problem with Fruit Loops is not the artificial colors. I suspect the problem with Fruit Loops is, again, not a doctor, not a dietitian, too much sugar. I mean, I sometimes look at cereals and I check to see how much sugar per 100 grams, and it freaks me out. Now, I granted, I'm a little bit of a thing for sugar. I don't eat a lot of sugar. But that's a lot of sugar in Fruit Loops. And, you know, it might have something to do with diabetes, and it might have something to do with putting on weight, and it might have something to do with making you crave more food and making you hungry all the time. I don't know. I think that's glycemic index. There's some science behind that. So RFK, you know, I'm glad RFK is going for the Fruit Loops. He's going to fix our Fruit Loops problem, not the sugar problem. No, that he wants real sugar, not corn syrup, although I don't think it matters that much. What really matters is the quantity of the sugar. But that doesn't bother him. It's the organic. Could you have organic corn syrup? There's an industry. I think we can make a lot of money, guys. Let's start Brooks Organic Corn Syrup. Or organic natural colors. Organic artificial coloring. I mean, the chemicals. Well, organic. I mean, we'll have to figure it out. I think there's solutions. I think there's a way to do this. I think there's a way to do it. Sugar's not poison, but sugar in large quantities is bad for you. You know, poison just hystericizes. Is that a word? Like if I eat like a plum, right? If I eat a plum, am I eating poison? No, of course not. Now, if I eat 100 plums, that's a little bit too much sugar, and a lot of I probably will feel sick the next day. But if I eat a plum, it's not poison. If I eat a peach, if I eat a mango, there's a lot of sugar in mango. But if I eat one mango, nothing's going to happen to me. I'm not eating poison. Now, don't eat a lot of mangoes in a single day. Don't eat a lot of plums. Don't eat plums and mangoes and bananas and all these other fruits all in the same day. But it's not poison. It's just in large quantities. It's bad for you. And it turns out that our fruit is probably genetically engineered to produce more sugar than it was originally planned. But that makes it tastier, which is nice. But it just means you have to eat less of it. But also, Coke and Fruit Loops and all these other things have huge quantities of sugar, far exceeding that in fruit. And therefore, there are real issues, there are real problems when we eat huge amounts of sugar. Don't eat huge amounts of sugar. It's pretty straightforward. All right. Last point. You remember Spirit Airlines? Spirit Airlines. I've never flown Spirit Airlines. It looked always like a pretty cheap bus-like way of flying, and it never appealed to me. But a lot of people in the United States flew Spirit Airlines and could afford. Spirit Airlines was very cheap, and they could afford to fly places they probably wouldn't have been able to fly if Spirit Airlines didn't exist. Well, Spirit Airlines built up this franchise of cheap, flights, and it reached a point where, in order to remain in business, in order to be profitable, it really needed to merge. It needed to gain scale, and it needed a partner. And two airlines tried to buy Spirit, JetBlue and Frontier. Frontier also discount airline, JetBlue slightly higher end. But both, I assume, I don't know this for a fact, had strategies of how to integrate Spirit Airlines into their network and make it possible for cheap flights to continue across the United States. Maybe if JetBlue had bought them, they'd be slightly more expensive, but they would have still continued to fly, and those airplanes would have been used. But of course, the federal government, in its wisdom, and you have to recognize that the federal government must have wisdom. Although this was under Democrats, so obviously their wisdom is not equal to the wisdom of the grand poobah, Donald Trump. But in their wisdom, basically raised antitrust concerns and blocked the merger. And Spirit could not sell itself to either JetBlue or Frontier. Well, today, it filed for bankruptcy. And by filing for bankruptcy, now we'll see it'll restructure. I don't know what'll come out the other side, but potentially, we're looking at basically Spirit disappearing, those planes not flying in the sky anymore, the number of airlines shrinking, the number of options for people going down, and this incredibly cheap alternative disappearing completely. So the government, through antitrust, Lena Khan, who J.D. Vance loves, and who Republicans, antitrust, which Republicans would like to continue, in their wisdom, decided that it was better for these mergers not to go through, and it was better ultimately for Spirit to go bankrupt. So we now have a bankrupt airline. It really is time to call these statists out in both parties and stop being such wimps about actually calling for a separation of state from economics. Because everything is moving in the opposite direction. Tariffs will increase cronyism, increase state intervention in the economy, not decrease it. And everything Trump is promising, not everything, most of what Trump is promising, involves increased involvement of the government in economics. Sad. Another sad day in America. All right, that is the news for November 18th. It is a Monday. And I will remind you, these shows are funded by listeners like you. They don't happen. My time is just not available for free. They have to be paid for. The time has to be paid for. Everything else has to be paid for. So thank you for all of you who fund these shows. You can fund the shows with Super Chat questions. That's one way. Or stickers. Some of you can just do a sticker, not a question if you don't have a question to ask. But the reality is that the show exists because of those of you who do fund the show. There are 150 people watching now on YouTube, another 170 on Twitter. Many of you do not support the show. It would be great if you get value from the show, value for value, if you found a way to support the show. One way is to do a super chat. Our goal is $250 for the first hour. We're about $100 short, so we're quite a long way away from the $250 goal for the first hour. And then, of course, we're going into the second hour, and then there's another $250 for the second hour. In addition, if you are not here on YouTube Live and you cannot use the super chat or sticker function, you can support the show on Patreon. You just go to Yaron Brook Show on Patreon. You can also go to yaronbrookshow.com, my website, and get a link there. And make a monthly contribution. And those are fantastic because those are steady and they always show up. And I don't have to wonder how much money am I going to raise from Super Chat today, because the money from the monthly comes in. Now, some people add and some people cancel, so it's never exactly the right number, but it's the same number, but it's fairly close. So that is really, really good. So I appreciate all of you who give on a monthly basis. I also really appreciate my sponsors. One of my sponsors, Alex Epstein, is having an amazing week. I mean, God. Alex has worked tirelessly for many years now, since he worked for me, since he left my employment, 12, 14 years ago, something like that, and started the Center for Industrial Progress. And since then, Alex has been the most important voice, the most influential voice on issues related to energy, climate change, environmentalism, and has really changed the debate, changed how people view it, changed, I think, America. And you're seeing it this week, because I know that Chris Wright, who's just been appointed Secretary of Energy, has been heavily influenced by Alex. I know that he has read Alex's books and heavily influenced. I know that I'm pretty sure that Bookdom, whatever his name is, from North Dakota, is also, who is now the Interior Secretary, and many others outside the administration, in Congress, in the Senate, have been influenced by Alex. So Alex is a powerhouse of influence, and probably in politics, I'd say the things that Alex has done is maybe the only positive thing I can think of in politics these days. And again, we're seeing the manifestation of that in some of Trump's nominees. The only nominees I like are the ones influenced by Alex. All right, let me see. And then the second sponsor is the Ayn Rand Institute. The The Ayn Rand Institute is holding a webinar on consumerism. Is it good, bad? How to be a rational consumer? How to be a proud rational consumer? How to do it right? And I think this is a really interesting topic, particularly given that we all grow up in an altruistic world, which is filled with guilt. And I think it's incredibly valuable to really think. Is many of our ways in which we approach our lives, to what extent is this guilt influencing it? I think this webinar with Don Watkins and Nikos is going to be really thought-provoking and stimulating and really get you to think about the various issues that are involved in our choices and in the values that we have internalized. You can find information about the webinar that is going to happen any day now on at aynrand.org/start here. aynrand.org/start here. Please participate and do that. All right. I see a bunch of people doing stickers. I really, really appreciate that. It's a way of supporting the show without asking a question. Stephen Harper has just done some. Chris McGraw did a couple. Mary Aline did a few. Indeed, if everybody who's listening right now did just a sticker to show appreciation, even if you disagree with me, it's kind of cool because the reality is that even if you disagree with me, you must get some value out of the show. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Jonathan Honig did a sticker way at the beginning. So did John. And thank you guys for the support. But if you get anything out of it, even ammunition against me, to increase your strife, then please consider a trade. A trade. I offer these shows for free. You guys can pay me back with a sticker or a question in the super chat. All right, let's jump in with Wes, who put in $50 for a question. Thank you, Wes. Really, really appreciate the support, the repeated support over a long period of time. John just did a $20 sticker. Thank you, John. Wes writes, I'm reading Atlas Shrugged for the second time. It's been many years since I first read it. Ayn Rand could freaking write. Yes, she could. Yes, she could. All the people who criticize her as not a good writer. I'm about to get to the running of the John Galt Line, one of my favorite scenes. The running of the John Galt Line, the scene where Dagny and Reardon are in the engine room, in the running of the John Galt Line, is, in my view, just one of maybe the best scene in the book, just for emotional impact. It's incredibly sexy. And really foreplay for the sex that Dagny and Reardon will have afterwards. I'm giving away a little bit of the plot, but that's okay. I mean, read that section from the perspective of foreplay. It's stunning. It's a stunning piece of writing. It's a beautiful, beautiful part. It's so values-oriented, so passion-driven. Yeah, really, really, really magnificent. So, which reminds me, I was interviewed by Australian television on yesterday. I was interviewed on Australian television last night. And like the second question out of the box, first, I had to listen through, like, you know, when you do television, they log you on early and you watch what's going on in the show until they're ready to go to you. And what was going on in the show before my segment was 15 minutes of praising Trump as if the guy was God's gift to humanity, the greatest thing to happen ever. It was sickening. I had to sit through the whole thing and then wait. So I was like, I was antsy already because I just had to sit through this whole how wonderful is Trump shtick. And then the questions came, and the first question, I can't remember what it was, but the second question was good because the guy said, you know, I read Ayn Rand when I was 19, and she's completely soulless. There's no soul in her novels. It's pure materialism. And I have to admit that I think my answer was pretty good. The beginning of my answer. I said, you know, you probably should read it again Because the impressions you have of a book when you're 19 years old are not always the most accurate. And then I went to the whole spiel how Ayn Rand is the opposite of soulless. And indeed, the running of the John Galt Line, the scene in the engine room with her and Reardon, are the exact opposite of soulless. Wow, what a soul. What a value-driven soul. That's not materialism. That's passion, emotion, but emotion driven by rational values. So, anyway, it was fun. Tim says, politics is not the domain of perfect action. No, it's not. But I'm railing against, not imperfect action, I'm railing against insanely anti-freedom, anti-reason, anti-liberty, anti-capitalist, anti-individualism action. I mean, if we were just saying, yeah, they're generally pro-capitalist, they're just not perfect, I would be very happy right now. I would be very happy right now. But the idea that the Trump administration is, you know, they're pretty good, they get a few things wrong, is just unbelievably bizarre. You could say the truth is the exact opposite. The Trump administration is really, 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 really bad for individual liberty, individual freedom, capitalism, I'm repeating myself. And it has a few things that are pretty decent. That's the reality. And you want to pretend it's otherwise? You can live in a fantasy world. And you, like me, and everybody else will suffer the consequences. But please, do me a favor. If you're going to live in a fantasy world, don't attribute that fantasy world to Ayn Rand. That's all. I mean, I have no idea what that is. Oh, okay. Let's see. Remo says, you recently said that it's a good thing the private R&D spending is increasing, but that does not have to be right, because wasted R&D spending has often been one of the agency costs of free cash flow. That is true. So when companies have a lot of cash, you know, they can do a number of different things with that cash. Ideally, if they are motivated by the right incentives, they will invest that cash in profitable ventures. And if there are no profitable ventures, profitable from the perspective of risk-return trade-off and from the perspective of long-term, but if there are no profitable ventures that they have available to them, they would return that capital to investors. That's what stock buybacks are for, and I'm all for stock buybacks because I think it's better to give investors back their money rather than the wasted on bad investments. But the reality is that it's very difficult ex ante and post hoc to determine whether R&D spending is good or bad. The reality is that a lot of R&D spending is going to be wasted, not because it was anticipated to be wasted, but because R&D, by its very definition, is risky. It's also true that in aggregate, the only way the U.S. economy is going to grow in the long run is if the private sector invests significantly in R&D spending. So I don't know if all the R&D spending is done rationally, profitably. I'd rather see it in aggregate grow than shrink, because I think generally businesses, particularly today with CEOs getting their compensation, a lot of their compensation is stock, CEOs being actual stockholders, that, you know, the the CEO's interests are reasonably well aligned with shareholders, and that they're likely to be doing the right thing. Now, I can't guarantee that, but it's also very difficult to judge from the outside because of the inherent riskiness of R&D spending. But again, from a macro perspective, what you want is more R&D spending, because that's where innovation, that's where new products, that's where increased productivity is going to come from. Why is somebody like Tim G even on this channel? Nothing is done rationally, he says. Well, if nothing is done rationally, then what are you here for? Bye. People waste their own time. That was always amazes me. It's not that they're wasting my time. They're wasting their own time. They basically disagree with me about everything. And they're here to what? To be entertained by how funny I am? I don't think I'm that funny. I don't know what they're doing. I think fundamentally it's people have nothing to do with their lives, and they decide to listen to people that they ridicule and think have nothing valuable to say, but they're going to listen to it. It's bizarre. Like, I have barely enough time to listen to people that actually value and want to learn from. I don't have enough time to do that. And these people have enough time to listen to people where the thought in their head is nothing's rational. I mean, if your thought in your head is nothing rational, why are you listening to anybody? Go do a seance. All right, Mary Eileen, this is the mentality of appeasement. It's the Neville Chamberlain all over again. Yes, the World War III stuff, yes. We are only emboldening Putin and Xi and Iran and so on. We never learn. That's right. I mean, the only force right there in the world right now not emboldening is Israel, to some extent at least. Not as much as I would like them to do, but they are at least putting the Iranians on their heels. They're certainly putting the Lebanese and Hezbollah on their heels. We will be talking about that, more of that, I'm sure, later this week. But the United States, complete appeasers, and Trump will continue that trend. Shazbot says, have you ever tried grown-up soda? It's a brand that uses a small fraction of the sugar that most brands have. No, I mean, I don't drink soda. I'm not, I now have, I have no interest in soda. I mean, I drink basically, I don't know, 4 or 5 things. Water, a lot. Coffee, a lot. That's about it, right? Mostly. Then once in a while, I'll drink a glass of wine. Once in a while, maybe I'll drink a glass of tea, unsweetened wine, I was going to say. Wine has sugar. And that's it. I don't drink anything else. Oh, well, once in a while, I'll drink like an immunity-boosting, fruit, juicy kind of thing when I'm traveling, knowing full well that it's a lot of sugar, but I don't do it often. Yeah, no, matcha latte, milk, and all that. I had, anyway, that's what I drink. That's it. I don't drink anything else. And I'm not interested in drinking anything else. It's not like I kind of have a vague recollection that I used to really enjoy drinking Coca-Cola when I used to, drink huge quantities of it a long, long time ago. But I'm done with it. It's okay. Move on. Next phase in life, the non-soda phase in life. That's me. Jennifer says, I agree with you that men and women are psychologically different. It's an interesting discussion how that all plays out across individuals, but I do know I personally like those differences. Yeah, I definitely think that there are differences, but I don't know. I can't prove that. I can't prove it, and I can't prove how they manifest themselves. But I also know that the chauvinists have, and the, evolutionary psychologists have distorted those differences, perverted those differences for various psychological, philosophical, political ends, and basically to subjugate women and to put them down. And I reject all of that. So on the essential and the most important thing, men and women are equally capable, and that is of thinking. That is of having reason. And then and then the question is, in what ways do the other differences manifest themselves? And I don't have an answer to that. I think it's an interesting question, and it's something that needs to be rationally evaluated by rational scientists, and I don't think it has. And I think the literature is not convincing either way. In recent months, I've gone back and nearly watched every show you've done on art and gained massive value from it. Your home tour blew me away. Are you planning any more? Shows on art. I'm not planning any more. I am giving 2 talks on art soon. I'm doing a talk on art and the rise of populism in Europe, in Oslo, in, the 1st of December or the 30th of November. So I'll be doing that. If you're in Oslo, you're welcome. I'll be doing 2 talks, one on populism, one on art, and one on the intersection between them. And then I'm going to be in Tokyo, where I will be doing a seminar on art and aesthetics. And there it's going to be, the Romantic Manifesto is being translated into Japanese. It's being published in Japan in Japanese. And to celebrate that and to honor that and whatever, we're going to be doing this seminar. So hopefully we sell a bunch of copies of the Romantic Manifesto while we're there. So I am interested in doing more, and I could do more shows on art on the Yaron Brook show in the future. Maybe members only shows and things like that. I need to do more members only shows, but so I will be doing those. I need topics, right? I mean, there's only so much after I feel like I'm repeating myself. So I need good topics. If anybody has good topics that I can talk about art, I don't know. I know what I know, and it's limited. Yeah. Give me ideas. I'll do it. Neocon. 3 realistic outcomes for Ukraine. 1, NATO membership. 2, developing nuclear deterrence. 3, becoming a Russian satellite state. What do you think? I don't think they'll develop nuclear deterrence. It's too difficult, and they're under the watch of both the Americans and the Russians about this. So I think it's 1 or 3. I don't know. Given that Trump is president, becoming a Russian satellite state seems more reasonable, and then less probability of NATO membership. But I hope it's 1, not 3. But I think 2 is out. Eviti, whatever. Any thoughts on Haviv Rettig Gut? I just heard a seeming great interview of him on Econ Talk, explaining a lot about Israel's history and perspective. I don't know him. I've heard about this interview that's really good. That's great. I'll look it up. I wish, what's his name on Econ Talk would interview me sometime, but he seems to resist it and avoid me. But that would be cool. But yes, I mean, there's a lot of good people who really know Israeli history. I'll check out Haviv. I mean, for all I know who he is. It doesn't connect with me right now. Optimus Prime, did you see Elon's tweet post praising Milei for slashing import taxes? American politics is getting unbelievably clownish. Yeah, pretty much at the same time as he supported Trump's tariffs. So it's okay for Argentina to lower tariffs as America increases tariffs. It's comical, it's clownish, it's absurd, it's political theater. Elon should be better than this, but I guess he's not. Enric, how can the states, military and police, react to a national emergency roundup? I don't think they can. I mean, we're not going to have a civil war, I don't think. So I don't know that the states can. I mean, theoretically, they can certainly not cooperate. But Trump's Side of the Deal is an awful, awful book. They certainly cannot. They can not cooperate which is good. And I guess they could put out a force to protect people, but would they really do that? And would Americans start firing at each other? Would this really lead to civil war? I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say. Let's see. So, you know, we'll have to watch it and see. We'll have to watch it and see. No, that's not what I wanted. One second. I'll be right there. All right. Thank you, Enric. Optimistic take. This is Evitic. Trump's admin so egregiously violates the Constitution that we get a good president from Fed, courts, and SCOTUS. Go IJ and PLF. How do the courts give us a good president? The courts don't appoint a president. I'm all for IJ and PLF. Absolutely, they're the best organizations out there doing this kind of work. But yeah, I don't see. I don't see how the courts can give us a good president. We need to change the culture. The culture is terrible. Jonathan, should Israel annex the whole West Bank? Probably, but exactly when and how and how it exactly works, and as you know, what do they do with the, you know, if they annex the West Bank, do they make all the Arabs their citizens? How do they justify not making them citizens? It's not a simple solution. So they need a comprehensive solution. And as part of that comprehensive solution, maybe annexation makes sense. But you need a comprehensive solution. Otherwise, the annexation is just going to blow up in your face. And it's going to create a two-tiered, real two-tiered society. It's all part of Israel. Right now, they can have the excuse, well, those people are not part of Israel, so they don't have full rights. But once they are part of Israel, how do you justify not giving them full rights? And I don't think they want to, right? I don't think they want to give them full rights. Yeah, somebody said, or even said Elon Musk criticized tariffs today on Twitter. I haven't seen it, so I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I haven't seen it. Elon, depends on the day, I guess, can go either way, right? I like numbers. Is your position that Islamists will attempt to take Europe but fail, and then the AfD or similar will create a second Holocaust against Muslims? Yeah, that's my position. Yep. I mean, I think Islamists are already trying to take over Europe. It's just that they're not strong enough. But once the Germans realize that that's actually what's happening, and there's enough violence from the Islamic side, I think the response will be another Holocaust against the Muslims. I've held this view for 20 years. It's not a view about the short run. It's a view about the long run. Always has been. Jacob, can you speak on foreign airlines and the lack of competition, artificial barriers imposed regarding Spirit Airlines going bankrupt? Yeah, I mean, foreign airlines cannot fly domestic routes in the United States. And I think it's true that the United States, American Airlines, can't fly domestic routes in Europe. One of the great things about the European Union is they have open skies for all European carriers. Argentina, as part of Milei's reform, has implemented open skies. So theoretically, at least, any airline can fly any route within Argentina. It doesn't have to be. But in America, in the United States of America, so-called capitalist America, crony, statist America, you can only fly a domestic route in America if your airline is owned at least 50% by an American. So, for example, when, Virgin Air wanted to start a U.S. airline, Virgin America, I think they're called, or something like that, they had to sell 51% of the airline to Americans, to American investors, to an American entity, so that they could get permission to run the airline. So and they couldn't fully integrate it. So, yes, imagine, by the way, prices for flying in Europe are a lot cheaper than they are in the United States because Europe is much more competitive, much less regulated when it comes to airlines. And the consequence of that is more competition, less regulation, and lower prices. And imagine if those low-cost airlines in Europe came to the United States and started flying domestically. We'd crush American Airlines, which is good, and we'd get really, really cheap airlines, and we'd probably get better service. Imagine if you could have Singapore Air fly domestic routes. I mean, you'd get amazing service. It would cost you, but you'd pay for the service. Michael, in what sense did Nietzsche reject altruism in an incorrect way? How could he reject altruism and still be a Kantian? I don't know. I don't know how Nietzsche is a Kantian. I'm not going to try to answer that question. It's beyond my pay grade. So that's a good question for Greg or for one of our philosophers. But the way he rejects altruism is he basically says, you shouldn't live for others. You should live for your own will, your own emotions, your own. I mean, there's a sense in which he has a categorical imperatives for your own instinctual goodness, whatever the hell that is. And you should completely disregard others. And in that sense, exploiting others is okay, as long as it leads to your vague interpretation of well-being. And that's wrong, because what he rejects is that man must live by reason, and not as a being of will and emotion, but a being of reason. And therefore, that the right way to live is life based on reason. Right? So he rejects kind of Christian sacrifice, but what he accepts is the Übermensch, the superior being who is beyond morality and therefore beyond Christianity and can exploit other people. But he doesn't give a guidance on how to live the good life for everybody. And how fundamentally that requires one to treat other people as traitors in justice, right? As traitors. So he rejects altruism, but adopts something corrupt in its stead. Robert, men, women, viva la difference. The desire to obliterate the difference between men and women is one of the worst recent cultural developments. Here's hoping it fizzles out as quickly as possible. Thank you, Robert. All right, Mary Eileen. J.D. Vance thinks women should be barefoot and pregnant. Do you think that will become, or is becoming, the Republican viewpoint? Certainly a segment of the Republican Party, no question. There is a kind of a manosphere. There's a segment of kind of the Catholic integralists that view men and women as different in those kind of stark terms. I don't think it's yet the position of the Republican Party, but it's certainly the position of big parts of the Republican Party. And look, I was going to say this earlier, but I didn't have time, and we could say this later. Look at who the Republican Party is nominating. It's nominating a bunch of men of low character, very, very bad character. And part of the manifestations of that character is the way these men treat women. But they adore them because of the way these men treat women, whether it's Trump himself and the way Trump treats women, or whether it's Matt Gaetz or the Secretary of Defense. So they were all mired in some kind of scandal in the sense of the way they treated women. And I think MAGA views that as a badge of honor. That means they're real men. Right? Lone Dissenter. Have you read Oren Cass's book, The Once and Future Worker? He's been making the media rounds as the economist influencing Vance Hawley. Interested in your thoughts, maybe a good show topic. I have not, and it'd probably be very hard for me to read the book. I'll read articles of his. A whole book seems like way too painful. He's awful. He's terrible. He's a socialist in basically conservative garb. He lies. He misrepresents reality, misrepresents facts, and the book is worthless. but he is the future of the Republican Party. He has a huge influence on Vance and Hawley and Trump and the people around Trump. And this is part of the reason why the Republicans are becoming socialists. It's because of people like Oren Cass. Socialists, or call it statists. They're not exactly socialists, but they really are statists. All right, Michael, is irrationality really on the rise, or is it always there? The internet just brought it out to the surface and allowed it to collaborate with MAGA. I suspect that it's on the rise. I suspect that 300 years ago we had even more irrationality. And then we had a period of relative rationality for about 100 and during the Enlightenment and during the 19th century and early part of the 20th century. I think people were relatively rational. But even then, you had communists and fascists. And I think that over the last 70, 80 years, the Enlightenment has been in decay and anti-Enlightenment forces have risen. I don't think that the internet has just revealed what was always there. I think the internet reinforces the bad, makes it even worse. But I think the cultural trend is that way. And I think that's how ideas work and that's how education works. It doesn't manifest immediately. It manifests over time. And we're seeing the consequences over time. Michael, do you think many objectives still have elements of altruism or skepticism in this system that they haven't entirely fleshed out yet? Yes, absolutely. There's no question. It's impossible to flesh them out quickly. It takes time. It takes effort. I think a lot of objectivists I know, and you can think about yourself, most of you probably have had to fight against altruistic tendencies that are in you and to get rid of them over time. And some of us are more successful than others. And it's a hard battle, and it takes a lot of time. So yes, I absolutely think that's true. Both altruism and skepticism, primarily altruism, though. It's deeper. Michael says, are you a fan of Stephen King? He's clearly very talented, but politically he's basically a communist lunatic. I don't know what his politics are. I don't really care. He's talented. I don't like horror, so I don't read Stephen King. I love the what do you call it? Shawshank Redemption, which is a story he wrote and a movie that was made based on it. But other than that, I don't like horror, so I haven't really read much of his stuff. Rafael, I don't think people are altruistic. I agree the ideal is to be selfless, but it's impractical, leads to pragmatism, which people mistake for selflessness and selfishness and never fully develop a true sense of self. I think all of that is mostly true, but they hold altruism, so they feel guilt for not being as altruistic as they should be. They know they should be. And then they vote altruistically. And it comes out all the time in the way they behave. So the primary way in which it comes out is that they never develop a proper self, in that they turn towards pragmatism. But it's not the only way. The wide variety of ways in which altruism manifests, and you can see it in people's behavior constantly. And you can see it in what they say and how they behave to their kids, how they view strangers. It's all over the place, how they view rich people. It affects everything that they do. So while they're not, I am going to live for other people altruistic, that idea that they should live for other people as a moral ideal infects, and it doesn't just infect it as pragmatism, it infects it in envy, in jealousy, in hatred, in the things they choose to do and not to do, and in emotions of guilt, and again, envy and things like that. It's a very complex phenomenon, which you've outlined some of it, but it's even more than that. Subkaski, Musk says we women should be afraid of being childless instead of fearing pregnancy. This horrifies me as a woman. They tie our worth to our wombs. Yes, I mean, the human race needs you to have babies. Because if you don't have babies, then there won't be a human race. We'll die out. And we men are quite happy to spread our seed around. It's you women have to decide that you're willing to get pregnant. And maybe one day the J.D. Vances of the world and the Musks of the world will say that since you behaved so responsibly, we will have to force you to do it. But no, that is absurd. The whole thing is absurd. You should live your life based on your values. If you want to have children, great. If you don't want to have children, great. Live the best life that you can. The best life that you can does not mean having children necessarily. For some of us, it does. I had children. For some of us, it doesn't. There's absolutely no necessity to have children. No psychological necessity, biological necessity, historical necessity. Your job is not to live for the collective. Your job is not to live for the group. Your job is not to live for others. Your job is to live the best life that you can. And don't listen to Musk. While he's a great entrepreneur, doesn't mean he knows anything about anything beyond that. And he doesn't. He's pretty dumb on some issues. Evitsky or whatever meant precedence from the courts, not presidents. Still, I don't get how that elects us president. What it does, it protects us, it shields us. It allows us to survive the stupidity of the presidents that we have. So in that sense, I agree with you. Tim says, no killing of babies. Yeah, I'm against killing babies. I'm all for abortion, though. I'm a huge supporter of abortion with no guilt, no shame, no embarrassment. Women should have the absolute right to end a pregnancy when they don't know to have a baby. So yes, I'm trying to say stuff that'll cause these people to ultimately leave, but no, they're masochists. What's the objectivist issue with skepticism? Well, we believe that there is such a thing as certainty. Knowledge is possible. Knowledge is available to us. I am holding up an iPhone, 100%. This is not. There's no probability here. There's no question. This is an iPhone, and I'm holding it. So skepticism is out. Skepticism is completely contrary to the objectivist epistemology, and I highly recommend reading Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology by Ayn Rand, and or reading the chapters on epistemology by Leonard Peikoff. I love it. Tim is saying, I won't leave. He's like a little child. Like if I tell him, great, I'm glad you're here, then maybe he'll leave. It's like, I won't leave. Yaron wants you to leave, so I won't leave. I will sacrifice my life. I'll waste my time, but I won't leave. I love people in the chat. Hi, Yaron. Do you know why there isn't a cure for autoimmune disease yet? Also, do you know who the leading researchers in the field are? I do not know who the leading researchers are, and there were a lot of different lines of research going on. There's a lot of people doing a lot of work on this, but why? Because it's super complicated. We still know very little about human biology, and with RFK now, Health and Human Services, we'll probably know less in the future than we know now. But we know very little about human biology. Human biology is unbelievably complicated, complex, and we still are trying to figure it all out. And autoimmune in particular, it's the body turning against itself. Why would it do that? And how do you stop it? And we do not know. We do not know. But I don't know who the leading researchers are. Mary Aline, when we're too old to have children, we're useless. That's right, Mary Aline. I don't know. Hanging around here? What are you thinking? What are you doing? The only purpose of a woman is to have children so that the humanity can continue surviving. I mean, talk about collectivism. Talk about mindless, irrational collectivism. And the whole field of demography boils down to collectivism in a variety of different forms and ways. And it is truly sick. Truly sick. And so you're seeing it, the rise of this right. What do they call it? I forget. There's a name for it. Natalist? No, it's not natalist. Something about having babies. Right, and it goes with their collectivism, and you're seeing the slow erosion, the slow demise of Enlightenment ideas across the entire political spectrum, really across the board. Nativism, is it nativism? I don't know. Natalism. It's natalism. Thank you. It's natalism. It's just it's a sick ideology. All right, everybody, I'm going to call it a night. Don't forget that we have another show in an hour and 20 minutes. I will be interviewing. I'll be interviewing Robert Zubrin. Robert is a specialist on Mars, but also on energy, nuclear, and who knows where the conversation will take us. We'll talk about a lot of different things. I'm looking forward to it. That's at 6 p.m. East Coast time. So in an hour and 20 minutes, join us, Robert Zubrin, and it should be really fascinating. I'm looking forward to it. See you all there in a little while. Bye, everybody. Thank you to all the super chatters.